Omar Kelly, formerly a Sun Sentinel beat writer for the Miami Dolphins, posted an article yesterday, and that article were answers to questions that he had received from some of his readers. When you read the answers that he posted, it probably is going to make you think, and it's probably going to take some people aback and may even cause some concern. So if you don't want to hear any straight answers, if you don't want to hear any straight talk about the Miami Dolphins' chances this year, go ahead and stop the video right now.
A few moments later.
So if you're still here, that tells me that you're willing to have an objective conversation about the Miami Dolphins' chances of being Super Bowl contenders this year. Omar doesn't pull any punches with the answers that he posted. Some of you may not like what he says. Some of you may object, but that's okay. Those are realistic answers that he puts out in this article. We're going to go through them one by one so you can see and think for yourself, I didn't think that. Or, yeah, I understand it, but I still think they're Super Bowl contenders. It seems, with what he's written, that the Miami Dolphins are that close from being Super Bowl contenders and that close from possibly being a doomed season. Let's jump into that article. So this is the article that Omar posted on Fan Nation, Sports Illustrated Fan Nation, about the Miami Dolphins. And he says, ask Omar, who are the most irreplaceable Miami Dolphins? So as Omar starts this article, he has to get into a bit of conversation to let people know, I don't need you to necessarily agree with what I say. Just try to have an open mind and just read through this and possibly reevaluate what you were thinking. So he starts off with, we can tackle some questions that make us reconsider our previous positions. Okay, that's all I've ever wanted people to take from my work. I don't need you to agree. Just hear me out and reevaluate whatever your previous opinion or stance is. I can completely understand that. When I post my videos, I'm not looking for agreement. I'm not looking for a head nod. I'm just looking to open your eyes and say, here's what I think. You may not like it. You may like it. You may like some. You may not like all of it. But the fact is, I want to talk to people who are willing to have an open mind. That's where the conversation begins. If you've already made up your mind, then, like I said, turn this video off and don't read this article. So let's continue. All right, so his first question that he posed, I hear Vic Fangio's interview about needing more talent. What other position is Vic Fangio wanting to upgrade on defense? Great question. Omar's answer, if that interview wasn't a cry for help, I don't know what it was. I agree. I 100% agree. I posted a video about it. People flamed on me for it, but the guy was saying, I don't have the pieces yet. He's going to go into what those pieces are that may be missing. And I'd have to agree with Fangio's perspective about Miami's lack of depth based on what I witnessed in the spring and summer OTAs and minicamp practice. I wasn't there. You probably weren't there either. So I'm going to have to take his word on this. He goes further. He goes, the Dolphins don't have any depth at defensive line. They lack linebacker depth inside and outside and have a lot of backup safeties, but seem to be missing a starter. Whoa. Think about what he just said there. No defensive line depth, no linebacker depth, and really no starter at safety. Championship teams don't have those issues. Next man up if somebody gets hurt. So you're telling me we have a Class A starting lineup, but there's no depth behind. This is football. People are going to go down. What happens if these players go down? You're saying there's no depth. There's nobody behind them. There's nobody that's going to come to the rescue. No wonder Vic Fangio said what he said. Let's continue. Okay, here's the next question. If Fangio runs a 3-4 defense and Christian Wilkins is not a nose tackle, do you see them re-signing Raekwon Davis and maybe letting Christian Wilkins walk? Whew. Also, do they need a backup nose tackle? Now, let me give you a little bit of perspective. I was a center and a nose tackle. Us type of guys don't grow on trees. Guys who can take abuse and plug up the middle, they're hard to find. Here's Omar's answer. The Dolphins definitely need a backup nose tackle unless Brandon Pilley blossoms in his rookie season. But that might be something the Dolphins can wait on until teams trim down down to the 53-man roster. So he's talking about wait until the other teams cut off. For now, as long as Davis is healthy, the franchise should be fine. For now. but Wilkins and Zach Sealer can't do what he does or fill that role. If Davis went down, we'd probably see Miami move to a 4-3 with Wilkins and Sealer playing traditional DT roles and Emmanuel Agba, Bradley Chubb, and Jalen Phillips serving as ends and rushers. So if Fangio wants to run a 3-4 and something happens with Raekwon Davis, then he's going to have to change his entire defense because there's nobody there to back him up. Again, that doesn't happen on championship teams. Let's continue. He says, I'm glad you brought this question up because it allows me to remind people how important re-signing Raekwon really is. He's not a flashy player, but I've been told by NFL insiders that nose tackle is the second hardest position to find and groom in the NFL, trailing only the quarterback. Yes, I told people that a long time ago. You don't just let nose tackles walk out the door as a free agent. So we're slim. We've got one guy who can play nose tackle, and if he doesn't get re-signed or he gets hurt, the whole defense has to be reconstructed. Agree or disagree? I agree. Next question. Apart from Tua Tagovailoa's health, what has to go well for the Dolphins this year to go deep in the playoffs? Omar's answer. The easiest way to achieve playoff success is to have a top 10 rushing attack and a top 10 defense. Dolphins didn't have anywhere near a top 10 defense last year. History shows that negates the need for an elite quarterback. So what he's saying is if you have a top 10 defense, you don't need to have an elite quarterback. If you have a top 10 defense and a top 10 rushing attack, you don't really need an elite quarterback. I don't know if he's taking a shot at Tua, but what he is saying is that we don't have those right now. The Miami Dolphins don't have either of those in place as we speak. Far, far from a top 10 defense, and obviously not a top 10 rushing attack. Maybe that's why they're going or looking at Dalvin Cook. Maybe that's why Devon Achane was picked up. But as of today, based upon last year's stats, the Dolphins don't have either of those things. Running the ball effectively and having an opportunistic defense, one that gets off the field on third downs and creates turnovers, could make the Dolphins participating in Super Bowl 53 if Tua stays healthy and able to replicate his productivity from the early part of the 2022 season. I put in early because we know how the season ended. So there's a lot of ifs there. If the Dolphins can get the defense up to top 10 level, if the Dolphins can get a top 10 rushing attack, if they can get off the field on third down, if Tua stays healthy. I told you this was a real objective look at things, and he's raising points that I think a lot of people just kind of ignore. So let's continue. Now, this question really got me. Besides Tua, who is the one player the Dolphins can't afford to lose to injury this year? Omar's answer is, I keep a running list of the most irreplaceable Dolphins because it helps me understand everyone standing on the team. And that list begins with Teron Armstead. Armstead is a difference maker on the offensive line. Now listen to what he says here. Without Armstead, this season would fall apart unless Isaiah Wynn magically becomes a comparable player. You get that? Without Teron Armstead on the field, quote, the season falls apart. So you're telling me that entire season, we're all looking at Tua staying healthy. Omar's opinion is if Teron Armstead goes down again, the entire season is toast. I hadn't looked at it that way. I had just assumed everything was based upon Tua staying healthy. And Omar's opinion here is that if Teron Armstead goes down, season's toast. And I had to think about that. And a lot of the problems that Tua had and later on in the season with the running game and different things, Teron was gone. He was hurt as well. And yeah, the season did go into the toilet. So I have to agree here. I have to completely agree that without Armstead, this season would fall apart. How many people have thought about that? How many people have realized how important a player Teron Armstead is to the Miami Dolphins? Do you agree or disagree? So in the next part of this article, he says a sentence here that is packed with concern. After Armstead, there's Tua, whose importance is enhanced by the fact that Omar isn't comfortable with the caliber of backup quarterbacks. Not happy. Doesn't see anybody behind him. Did they make a mistake by getting rid of Teddy Bridgewater? I'm not sure. But he's saying that the guys behind Tua just ain't it. So if he goes down, that's going to be a problem. And then there's Davis. If Miami lost Davis, they would likely need to switch base defensive fronts because Wilkins and Sealer can't hold up against double teams on a regular basis as nose tackles. And a 3-4 defense doesn't work without a nose tackle, obviously. And the fifth player on my most irreplaceable list would be inside linebacker Jerome Baker, because there's a massive step down from Baker. So, and he doesn't have much faith in Channing Tindall, Duke Riley, or David Long. He doesn't think David Long is capable of playing 17 games. I told you this article was packed with concern. I told you that Omar gave some real eye-opening statements in this article. Some you may agree with, some you may not agree with. But nonetheless, what happens if Raekwon Davis doesn't get re-signed or goes down? The defensive scheme is toast. What happens with the depth at linebacker? Unless Vic Fangio can find the various pieces of the puzzle just in case something happens. What happens if Teron Armstead goes down? Omar says the season is toast. And we obviously know what happens if Tua goes down. And Omar is saying none of the backup quarterbacks are even viable at this point. So I read this article and I was like excited about the Dolphins season. Went, yeah, it looks like the Dolphins beat Contenders. And then I went, whoa, you probably just did the same thing. There's so many holes here. There's so many different bear traps that the Dolphins can step in. And Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer need to manage all of it. What happens if Tua goes down? What happens if Raekwon Davis isn't re-signed or he goes down? What happens if Teron Armstead goes down? And all of these things aren't like they're foreign. We know Tua's been hurt. We know Raekwon Davis has been hurt. We know Teron Armstead has been hurt. You know there's no depth behind the defensive line. You know there's no depth behind the linebackers. And now he brings it out. Me and Omar has brought it to the surface where a lot of people need to look at this and go, wait a second. And I'm not talking about us as fans. I think Chris Greer needs to look at this article and go, Omar just exposed our weaknesses. We got a 17-game season ahead of us, and we have all these holes still yet to fill. We look great on paper because we're talking about all the front-level stars. And that's not even including a potential suspension of Tyreek Hill. So let me know what you guys think, but it looks like the Dolphins are skating on some pretty thin ice. Love to know your comments. Fins up.
Is anybody catching on to this Barry guy?